Okay, we're ready to go. So a bit of English idiom. This is called the graveyard shift. So this is when everyone's full of food and they go to sleep. I'll try and avoid that happening. So my name is Nigel Milligan, and I'm a Drupal consultant, freelance from London. I've been freelance all my working career, so that's a long time. I kind of specialize in the architecture of Drupal sites, but also got an interest in DevOps, AWS technologies, and also if you need a Golang website, please come to me. I've just created a partnership in London with two of my best buddies, and we're kind of the same sort of age, so we've got a lot of experience behind us, and we're called Panaline. So again, if you've got any work, then please come and speak to me. I'm known on the internet as Badzilla, or Badzilla Co UK, and I've got a blog called badzilla.co.uk. Please check it out. Oh, and finally, I don't know if any of you guys are using the Drupal VM, which the Geerling guy put together, but I've kind of got a cut-down version of it called the Badzilla VM, and it will run 4 different versions of PHP concurrently, which Jeff Geerling's won't. So it could be quite useful in a digital environment. So I saw this done a couple of weeks ago at Front End United, big QR code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you today about a sequence of blogs I've written over a 5-month period. So if you point your phone to it, I might get some web traffic. And the presentation is about turning a Drupal 8 site into an HTML static site. So you're now thinking, is that guy nuts? Why would you want to do that? Well, I'm not saying get rid of Drupal 8 entirely. What I am saying is don't have Drupal 8 on a production site. So on the left-hand side, we've got one of 2 options. We can either have our Drupal site in a virtual private cloud, or we could, just like I'm doing right here and now, have mine in a sandbox, VirtualBox on my laptop. And then we would deploy our static code to production, and also we'll take over a few other things as we go along. So I'll tell you about that then. Okay, why would you want to do it? Well, if you run a static site, then you've removed like the 2 biggest attack vectors on any site, which is PHP and MySQL. You've also removed the need to slavishly apply security fixes, which are, I don't know about you guys, but I subscribe to the Wednesday evening Drupal emails, and I just get loads of these. And if there's a Drupal-geddon type event, well, they tend to be very time critical. That means you've got to drop everything. You've got to keep up with the latest security patches, and that means you're going to have to do deploys on the evening that the event was announced. So if you've got a static site, well, there is no arms race to keep ahead of the exploiters. So we have another English idiom is, we're not playing cat and mouse. You've probably got an equivalent in Polish. So cat and mouse basically means the exploiters are trying to find vulnerabilities on your website, and the security team are trying to fix them. And this is just a perpetual cycle. So if you have a static site, that problem is removed in a trice. It also means, of course, you've got less complex production stack to maintain. So no DevOps and no ops required. Okay? Well, there are limitations to this approach. So you're going to lose any Ajax functionality because guess what? You've got no Drupal backend. So it goes. Paginators are going to be a problem, but not insurmountable. We'll come to that. And forms such as search or newsletter signups, contact us, well, they're going to need an alternative technology. And pretty much all sites, even brochure sites, tend to have that functionality there. So if we're going to create static sites, we're going to need some sort of replacement technology to cover this eventuality. So also, many people use contextual filters in views. Well, with a static site, you've lost them. And anything dynamic, anything user-focused, authentication, for instance, that's not going to work either. So I'm not saying that this is going to work for every use case, but there are particular use cases for static sites. And this is a bit of a teaser. So right at the end of the presentation, I'll tell you why you'd use them and when you'd use them. So this is to keep you awake, hopefully. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if you've just gone over to my my badzilla.co.uk website, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a whole sequence of my blogs, and this is the path from turning a regular Drupal 8 site into a static site. Okay, and to do that, first and foremost, we're going to need a search alternative. So I want to retain my search. Can't use Drupal's core, because guess what? The backend's gone. What do I do? Okay, well, I could use Google Site Search, of course. See, I've got a problem with that. And the problem is that Google Site Search now carries ads in the free version. And that's really bad, because you do a search on your website, and the ads will probably have links to your competitors' sites. So people will click through, and you've lost them. Why would you want to do that? I don't know if anyone here has used Algolia. It looks really, really neat, but it's an enterprise search solution, probably not good for what we're doing here, and it's certainly not free. So I'm not going to try that. And again, I don't know if anyone's used any of the JavaScript client-side searches, but there's Views, Luna, and List. I tried them all. They're all okay, they've all got limitations, they're all a little bit clunky, but they all do work. In the end, I didn't really want to go that direction either. So I thought, why not Elasticsearch and the Elasticsearch JavaScript client? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, but what about our forms? So we've kind of dealt with the search, but what about a form? So with newsletters, well, you can redirect on submit to MailChimp, or to a .mailer type solution. You can use Google Forms, of course, if you want to go the Google route. Or you can really push the boat out, again using some English idiom, and you can build your contact form with a submission to AWS Lambda, which will also use an S3 bucket, gateway API to route it, and says to email out to the intended recipient. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go for Elasticsearch for our search replacement, and we're going to go for Lambda for our contact form. And how we're going to do it? Okay, well, there's a great guy in the Drupal community in America. He's called Sam Mortensen. He works on the security team. He's not been involved very long, but what he knows now is absolutely incredible. He's made such progress over a very short period of time, and he's also known as Drupal Sam. Very, very approachable. And he's developed a module called the Tome module. And guess what? Well, it installs like any other module. And when it does its business, it creates a list of all known paths that are accessible to anonymous traffic. Anonymous, I hasten to add. And you can either generate your static pages by using the admin UI, because there's a screen there to do it, or by Drush, which is my preferred method. And to do that, you'd use a command there. You can see it. It's Drush Tome static. There's the URL, badzilla.co.uk. So let's see what happens. Okay, so when Tome is running its stuff, it's busy going away, running all these commands, building our pages, and it doesn't take seconds, it doesn't take hours, but it does take a few minutes. So that's why I'm just showing a screenshot which is on one of my blogs. I was thinking of running it in real time, but it's a good 5-6 minutes for my website, which has got something like 200 blogs. So I kind of thought that might be a little bit tedious. Okay, so once you've created all your HTML pages, and I'll just give you a quick preview of what they look like. So we drop down to the command line, and I don't know if this is easy to read because the blue color doesn't get picked up particularly well. Now, if you can, I don't know if you can see that, but my project directory is medium, so that's an alias I'm using for Badzilla. And then underneath that, I have a directory called docroot, like most of us do. But at the same level, a sibling is called static. And underneath that, I've got the HTML, which is generated by Tome. Okay, so if I now list it out, see a whole bunch of blue files. Now they're directories. So what Tome is doing is it's creating a directory for every single page. Okay? And then underneath each and every one of those pages, you get an index.html created. So I'll just prove that. Okay, so I just pasted one of those directories into the command line, and you should be able to see index.html. So that's how it works. And if we see it in reality, so there's a number of tabs here. The left-hand side one, you've got to remember this. Left-hand side one, this is my statically created local site. The next one along is my Drupal site, which is also local. So this is where I'm doing my development. This is where I'm generating my HTML files. The next one along, so this is drupal.co.uk, out in the wild. This is hosted somewhere in Germany. And I've not yet created a static site out of this. So this is still Drupal, and it's still using Drupal's inbuilt search facility. Okay, so let's flip back. So this is the static version of the site. Now if we click one of these links, okay, that's now been served up by Nginx. And what you'll see on the URL bar, I hope you can see it, is a /. So you get the / because it's actually serving up the index.html file, which is underneath that particular directory. So that's how you know you're in a static site. Okay, so any problems with Tome? Well, by and large, no. It works extremely well. But one thing it can't do is it can't second guess the file extension of a particular file. So I contribute to Drupal Planet, which is an RSS aggregation feed. And my Drupal Planet feed is at a URL called planet/feed. So what Tome is going to do under that circumstance is it's going to create a .html. That's no good to me. Okay? So a very, very easy workaround is we will change the feed URL to planet/feed/feed RSS. That's easy. Okay? Elaborating on that further, and this is a bit more insidious. So the second problem is that wildcards in views are not respected particularly well. They do work, but not in all circumstances. So again, on each one of my landing pages, and I'll just show you. So each and every one of these blog terms at the bottom of the page is just a standard taxonomy term. So if I click on, for instance, Drupal, okay, that's a landing page. And underneath that, I want an RSS feed. If we flip back, so I want it of the convention page taxonomy /term and then a wildcard. So, sorry, then wildcard and then feed. And again, Tome cannot honor that because it can't understand what that wildcard's going to be. Now, we can do it for the term itself, but it can't do it for the feed. So the term itself, it works because I've got aliases. So each and every one of my taxonomy terms, I created an alias. So that, for instance, /Drupal. Okay, but the feed doesn't have it. So how do we get around that? Okay, well, any guys here who've come from a Symfony background will probably know what an event subscriber is, and it's gaining a lot of traction with Drupal 8 developers too. So we need to create an event subscriber that will automatically add the taxonomy RSS path, and then you'll be able to create the static pages. How do we do that? Okay, and how we do that is we have to create a custom module. So we're going to put our event subscriber in a few lines of PHP, and the beauty of it is that I'm using the same mechanism that Tome uses to add the path when it's figuring out how many static pages it needs to generate. So this is pretty much a copy and paste exercise. It's not difficult. It took me, I don't know, an hour or two to figure it out. Okay, so we're using a class called root path subscriber, and it has to implement event subscriber interface. I'm not going to go through this line by line. It's just, that'd be a bit too tedious. But this is where the heavy lifting is undertaken. So it's in a function called collect path, and okay, so the layout's pretty broken on my website, but you should be able to see that all I'm doing is I'm looking for all the terms in technology, and I'm checking that it's an array, doing the usual sanitation stuff, checking that the array has entries, and if so, I just go around adding all these paths using that method there. And lo and behold, by doing that, then Tome will understand where these RSS feeds are. Okay, now the third problem, this is fairly insignificant, but you do need to tell your server, be it Nginx or Apache, that we're not just serving up index.html files, we're also having to serve up feed.rss files as well. So it's a one-line, well, it's a three-liner in Nginx, and it's pretty similar in Apache. Okay, so there's the syntax. Very easy workaround for a small problem. Okay, let's move on to Elasticsearch. So I've chosen Elasticsearch to be my search product for my static site. So how's that going to work? Well, if you look at the box on the left, I'm going to have a local copy of Elasticsearch, and I'm going to run Elasticsearch as my preferred search vendor on my Drupal site. Now, I'm not going to go into how to set up Elasticsearch on Drupal. There's many, many blogs out there, but it uses the search API. For whatever reason, in the past, Drupal has been very aligned to Solr, but there are plenty of blogs out there if you want to use Elasticsearch instead, which was my preference, because you get Kibana with it, so it's well worth doing. So you set that up, and you have Elasticsearch on your local sandbox environment, and then when you're ready to do a deployment, you will dump that index, and you copy that to your production version of Elasticsearch. Okay? Now, because you're not using Drupal's core search anymore, you're going to have to come up with an Elasticsearch query. So it's kind of arbitrary, and it's built on my own experience and kind of what I wanted. I think you could spend an eternity kind of fine-tuning this and deciding which fields you decide are more important to you. But I went easy, and I decided that I wanted title, I wanted the body, and I wanted the taxonomy term. Okay? And I didn't want to AND them together, which is the default behavior in Elasticsearch. I wanted to OR them. So I've overridden the normal operator. So that's a few lines down. Okay, and then the highlight section is, well, that's what you get returned. So I want to do the neat things like Drupal does, like it highlights the text of the words which you've chosen to search for. And the other neat feature with Elasticsearch is you've got a date decay facility. You've got a decay facility, and I've used it for date. So the problem with a blog is that over a period of time, your blogs become less and less relevant. And most blogs have a shelf life of 1 or 2 years. And after that, you kind of don't really want them to be displayed prominently, and they just kind of disappear until they flatline. So I've decided that I want to have mine to decay over a 10-year period. So the first year, I want it to be prominent. And then the next 8 years, I want it to decay exponentially, sorry, not exponentially, linearly, but you can also make it exponential. And then after 9 years, it flatlines. Okay, so that's my approach. You can play around with this to your heart's content. Okay, so you have to add to your query this here. Now this is quite esoteric. I'm not going to try and explain it, A, because I've kind of forgotten how I did it, and B, because I'll probably lose you and you'll fall asleep. But go and have a look at my blog if you're kind of struggling with the syntax of that. Okay, so before we go on any further, let's go and check out my search. So my left-hand tab, don't forget, is my static site. So let's search on Apache. Okay, that was fairly quick, took about half a second. And here we've got our results. Okay, my next tab is my Drupal site local. Again, it seemed a bit quicker, for whatever reason. And then this is my production site, which doesn't have Elastic. This is Drupal core. Okay, now, if we just scroll down, you'll notice that the fourth entry on Drupal core is PHP Zend framework blog, which I wrote. Okay, so it says 2017. It's not actually 2017. I wrote that, I think, about 10 years ago. And it's got less prominence in the Elasticsearch because of the date decay facility, so it's 10th. Okay? One thing I didn't mention, which we'll go back to, is the client. So the client is, Elasticsearch comes with a JavaScript client. Now it's beta, but it's kind of like a lot of Drupal modules. They say the beta, but they work perfectly fine. And the Elasticsearch client really does work well. So I would strongly recommend you use that to connect to your server. You don't have to, you can roll your own JavaScript. But I'll show you my code. Okay, now I don't pretend to be the greatest JavaScript coder on the planet by any means, but here we have the query which I've plugged into my JavaScript, and then we've got a whole bunch of messy code where I'm dealing with how I output the results to the screen. Okay, so it's actually very, very simple. Now what we don't have on here just yet is a paginator. But I genuinely don't think that adding that functionality would be particularly difficult and might represent 1 or 2 days' work, if that. Okay, so that was search. Now let's have a look at the contact form. So we know that if we're going static, we're still going to need a contact form. And how we're going to do it? We're going to do it with AWS. And how it works is this. We have a web page with a contact form. Form is submitted. Gets submitted to a URL, which is on AWS, which will trigger a Lambda function to run. The Lambda function will run some PHP code, and it will then send my code. So that code will then interpret what has been submitted in the form, and it will send it to AWS SES, simple email service, to send a message to me to inform that someone's trying to contact me. Okay, so that will arrive in my inbox. We'll test that in a minute. And also at the same time is the user will be redirected to a thank you page on the website. So we're going to use the default website feedback form, which is bundled for free with Drupal 8. Kind of makes sense. And we're going to modify the way the form is submitted. So we end up going to the AWS gateway. And to do that, we're going to add a theme preprocess form update and modify the variables attribute action. So really, really simple stuff. Okay. Now, how are we going to achieve that? Well, we're going to use a product called serverless. It's a product called serverless. It's not the concept called serverless. Go and check it out, but it's a really, really neat way of writing your code locally and then submit it to AWS. And it supports Golang, Python, Java, Node, Ruby, C#. No PHP. Damn. Okay? We can still use PHP. There's a way around it. And I would recommend if you're working in the PHP house, go this route. So you select Node.js as your preferred language. Then you use what's called a JavaScript shim, which is like a spacer, which will exec PHP on the command line in Lambda. And then there's a PHP runtime, which we've already uploaded to Lambda. And that will run, and it will process the form. So there's a guy in London called Andy Rains. He's very well known in the Symfony world, and he's written a repo which is available on GitHub, which gives you a great starting point, and it gives you the PHP runtime, and it gives you the JavaScript shim, and it gives you the serverless configuration. So you've got to do very little to get this to work. Now, all this might be, you might not have had any exposure to AWS before, but you've got my assurances, it's actually quite easy. And I have written a sequence of blogs about this, so if you want to go and check out my website again, it's all there. And just as a side note, you can also use Lambda to serve up web pages. Why would you do that? Well, there is a use case for that too. So, for instance, if you've got a campaign coming along, and you really don't know how successful this campaign is going to be, you never know how much traffic you're going to get, then why don't you just create something simple in Lambda? It will serve a web page up, and you're not tied down to big DevOps costs for something which may not be particularly successful. Now, you have to be careful with this. The Lambda function needs to have fairly small footprint, so you couldn't do it, for instance, with Drupal, but you could certainly put a few PHP pages together if you so wanted to. Now, I've done this, and I did it with Cancer Research. It was very good for their campaigns. It was a complete success. So give it a go at some point. Okay? And then when we finished doing this, we need a thank you page. So in my particular example, we're just going to loop back to the page which I created already with the form on it. And we're going to do a logic check in a very small snippet of JavaScript. And if the referrer of the document is the same as the URL, that kind of suggests it's gone all the way to AWS and back, and then just inject a thank you message. So that's pretty easy. Okay. So let's show you this in action. What I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy some code. Now, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to change my PHP code on the fly because that was just a complete disaster. But what I will do is I'll switch on logging. So when I submit my form from my static website locally, and it goes to AWS, you should see the logging output, and we can prove that it's actually done its stuff. And to do that, we're going to use PHP Storm. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set off the deployment in a second, and I'm going to walk you through the components while it's doing the deploy, because that's going to take 2 or 3 minutes. So I've just uncommented a line of code. I don't know if you can see it. It's not critical, but I'm dumping out the contents of a variable called event. Okay, so let's give this a go. And to deploy your code, it's really, really simple. It's just serverless deploy, or shortened to SLS deploy. Right, okay, so let's have a look at the serverless side of things. What does it look like? Well, you've got to populate a YAML file before you can do anything. Most of this comes pre-supplied with correct variables before you do anything, and that's the work of Andy Rain's repository. But there's 1 or 2 things which I'll point out to you, and like I said, we're going to have to try and spoof Lambda into thinking that we're running Node, because it doesn't support PHP natively. So we've called it a Node project. We're also going to have to tell it that we want to use Amazon SES to send our email to me with the contents of the form. So again, there's some configuration in there for that, but the rest of it is pretty simple stuff. Now, these can get complicated if you're using DynamoDB and using complex IAM permissions, but on the whole, this is pretty easy. When you do a deployment, what it's doing is it's converting this to CloudFormation script. Now, look at this. This is pretty hairy, and if it wasn't for serverless, you'd have to construct that. That's going to stand up your S3 bucket. It's going to stand up your API gateway and your requirement for AWS SES. This is the JavaScript shim. And I'm just going to point out 1 line if I can find it. And that is, well, there we started. It's the launch of PHP. So we're running the entry point, which is just called handler.js on the command line, and that's going to spawn the PHP function. And this is the function here. This is what Lambda is going to run through, and it's very, very easy. All we're doing is we're logging what we're getting back. We are parsing the contents of the form, and we're converting that using the AWS SDK into an email array, which I think you can see there. So I'm, at that point, sending my email to Amazon SES. Okay. I think the deploy worked okay. So now what we're going to do, I'm just going to give you a quick look around. So I've already logged into my AWS console. And I don't know if any guys here have used AWS products before, but you're confronted with this screen here, which is just utterly amazing. So this is a list of the products in the AWS suite. Just so many of them doing such amazing stuff. But we don't need to know about everything. We need to know about Lambda. So let's click on that. And here is our contact form. So this is the dashboard. You can invoke Lambda functions manually by coming to this dashboard. And we can also go to S3. So our code is stored in S3 bucket. And this is the contents of the bucket. Okay, and what it's done is it's tarbored everything up. Well, sorry, it's zipped everything up, and this is the release history. So I've had 5 different versions of my code, uploaded to the S3 bucket. If we go to Cloud Formation, this is the orchestration script which serverless constructed, generated. And then if we go to the API gateway, we should see that we've got our contact form, and we're just looking for the method post. Okay, so I think we're good to go. So we go to our static site. We go to the About Me page, and here's my form. Let's put in a suitable subject. Okay, well, we got the thank you message, but did it actually hit AWS? Well, let's see. So now we have to navigate on the dashboard to Cloud Watch. Okay, so this is the log for our particular form. And hopefully the guy at the top is the one which just happened. Yep, so here we can see the contents of that event array, and we can see right at the bottom, this is the content of the form which I submitted. So it's worked. Also, we can have a look at this guy here. And this gives you some metrics. It's not going to open up for me, but it gives you some metrics of the Lambda function. And Lambda is costed in both the amount of memory it uses and also the amount of milliseconds in 100 millisecond intervals it takes to run. So you want a kind of small figure, but having said that, you get 1 million Lambda invocations for free every single month. So it's pretty unlikely, unless you're very, very popular, your contact form is going to run to that many. Okay, so I think we've proven that did work, honestly. Okay, so that's kind of it. Well, still a few things to do. So, like I said, I've not actually moved this over to badzilla.co.uk yet. So I still haven't put Elasticsearch on my production site, and I do need to set the index to read-only. Otherwise, obvious reasons, that would be a bit of a vulnerability. Also, I need some sort of automated deployment. So someone creates some Drupal content, either in the sandbox or in a private cloud, and then we have to make sure the index is updated locally, and then we have to trigger a dump of Elasticsearch and make sure that gets to prod, and all the HTML has to be generated, and you can't just cherry pick, so everything's got to be generated in one go, and then send it off. And then you need to think about hosting. So I don't know if anyone here has used GitHub Pages. It's absolutely fantastic for static sites. Works so well. And it's free. Netlify, I've used that. That works well. That's free too. You can also use AWS CloudFront and S3. Well, that's kind of free to a certain extent, but if you're uploading a lot of stuff over a period of time, then you will jump out of your free tier and there will be costs associated with it. Some optimized Nginx or Apache, so you want to do things like make sure that when you're sending content to a user, that it's gzipped correctly. And at the moment, yeah, I didn't check. So let's just do that quickly. I didn't check whether the email had arrived. Okay, so it's not in my inbox, but there is a reason for that. At the moment, it just goes to my spam folder. So that's something I need to look at as well. I've not even looked into this yet. I kind of think that's going to be an easy fix. But the email has ended up on my email account anyway, so that's kind of a success. But going back to the presentation. So what's the use case for this? I mean, it's all very well and good me talking about these toys, these technologies. What's the point? Where are the use cases? Well, there is a very valid use case. I've worked with clients who are household names. You've all used their products. And their very, very top guy has stipulated that every single website they build must be Drupal. No exceptions. So in certain cases, they've got these wonderful enterprise solutions which work fantastically. Great. But they've also got a brand presence. Every single brand has a brochure-type Drupal website. Furthermore, this client also stipulates that every single website must go through 1 month of penetration testing before it goes live. It's a lot of money, a lot of time. So my job is to convince this client that there's an easier way. You go out there, you can save a lot of money with your Acquia platform by having less environments if you're going to go my way and just generate static content. In fact, I've just said what it says on this form here. Yeah, so in closing, you're creating your content locally, then the HTML is going to be copied to production. Okay, questions? Everyone get it? Did everyone understand that, by the way? Yeah? Cool. I think we've got like 1 minute or something, haven't we? There's 1 minute. Come on, give me some questions, please. I feel like you've all been asleep and you weren't actually listening if you don't give me a question. I wanted you to sleep, yeah, that is true.
What do you plan to do with AWS? Because my case, my mail goes to promote similarly about things. What is your plan? What do you want to do with this issue? What do you want to do with this issue?
Of the spam? Yeah, so I must admit, I thought that was going to be a trivial fix. I've not even spent any brain power investigating it yet, because I assumed this is going to be like 30 seconds. There must be a way of making sure it doesn't go to your spam. Maybe the sender's email could be an AWS. Do they even issue email accounts? I don't know. But there must be a simple solution out there to do it. You're not sure? Okay. I genuinely don't know. I've not tried it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. This module that you showed, is it possible somehow in that module to make sure when you add a new blog post or something that all the HTML is created automatically?
There isn't at the moment because there's no API. But Sam Mortensen, Drupal Sam, he's really engaged and he will create an API to do that kind of thing because I asked him and then I didn't want to impose myself by asking again. So he would certainly, with the right provocation and prompting, he would definitely put that functionality in. And there's something else which I haven't mentioned is that Tome, the primary focus with Tome is not what I've shown you today. It's actually creating a JSON output of the entire website, although I think that's been bundled into 8.6 anyway in core. And the reason being that then you can kind of hook it up with Gatsby.js. So that was the raison d'etre of Tome module in the first place. But creating these static files in HTML was a kind of a side effect as well. So you can either output in JSON and use Gatsby.js, or you can output the entire HTML files and use it as I have done. So you've got options with it. And like I said, Sam is very amenable to people approaching him. Any more? Okay, I think we're done.